I used to believe sacrifice would guarantee love, but standing in my mother's study, I learned the truth. It only guaranteed silence while they planned my erasure. If you've ever felt like the ground beneath you was laid by someone else's lies, or if you've ever wondered whether your kindness was mistaken for weakness, stay with me. This story is probably yours too, because betrayals like this don't come with blood. They come with velvet chairs, hushed lawyers, and a signature you didn't write. I'm Elyse Varnon. I'm 32. I run a boutique interior design firm in Seattle. For the last 6 years, I also ran my mother's household while she withered through illness. Before I tell you how I turned my grief into a weapon they never saw coming, subscribe. One small click that means the world to storytellers like me, trying to bring you even better stories. But back then, I wasn't thinking about justice. I was clutching a will that didn't include me and trying not to fall apart. The air in Margot Varnon's study always smelled of eucalyptus and dried lavender, her idea of comfort. But that morning, it smelled like betrayal. Old mahogany shelves loomed around me like witnesses. The family lawyer, Julian, cleared his throat and began to read. And to my daughter, Taryn Varnon, I leave the full balance of my estate, including property, holdings, and accounts, totaling approximately $2 million. I blinked. And to my eldest, Elyse. He paused, eyes twitching behind thick glasses. I leave my love and gratitude. I didn't hear the rest. Not the rustle of papers. Not even the smirk sliding across Taryn's glossed lips from the other side of the room. Just the sound of my pulse, thudding like footsteps down a long hallway I didn't remember walking into. My hands trembled as I looked down at the document. My name, Elyse Varnon, in plain serif font, followed by nothing that resembled fairness or family. I had nursed her. I had given up a Manhattan design job for her. I had slept in the fold-out next to her hospital bed, warmed soup, bathed her feet. Taryn had been on a cruise when Mom fell, then a silent retreat in Sedona, then something with an energy healer in Tulum. But here she sat now, perfectly bronzed, manicured, draped in pale silk, as if the inheritance was simply her birthright, as if I was just the placeholder for a story they had rewritten without me. My thumb traced the edge of the will, trying to ground myself. Was this some mistake? I glanced toward Julian, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he started gathering papers with the efficiency of a man desperate to exit the room. "Is this real?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Taryn didn't wait for an answer. "Well," she said, rising from her seat, "that went smoother than I expected." Her heels clicked across the hardwood, every step a slap to my chest. She paused at the door. "I mean, no hard feelings, sis. Mom just trusted me more." Then she was gone, and I was left standing in a room I had once painted for her, soft sage green, Margot's favorite, wondering if I had misunderstood my entire life. I sank into the leather armchair, unable to breathe, let alone cry. It was as if grief had layered itself with betrayal, and both were choking me quietly. Outside, the clouds over Puget Sound looked heavy, and inside me, something started to crack. Why would she do this to me? The woman I spoon-fed when she couldn't lift her hands? The one I read poetry to at midnight when her lungs rattled from pain? The one I forgave, over and over, for never saying the words I needed to hear. My fingers curled tightly around the will. I caught sight of her signature. Margot Varnon. Strong, crisp, too clean. Too clean? A chill skated down my arms. I stared at the signature, suddenly unsure. Something about it felt off, not just what it meant, but how it looked. I slipped the paper into my bag, heart racing. There was something else here, something I hadn't seen, behind the lavender, behind the silk, behind the silence. And that was the moment I realized. Something about that morning didn't add up. I didn't sleep that night. The storm outside had long passed, but something colder settled inside me. Not grief, not even anger yet, just a bone-deep confusion that throbbed beneath my skin. At 3:17 a.m., I found myself in the kitchen, barefoot on the chilled marble tiles, staring into a half-empty fridge like it might hold a reason. There was nothing. Just expired milk, a shriveled lime, and Margot's favorite salmon, vacuum-sealed and untouched. I had driven all the way to Pike Place last week just to get it. The vendor knew me by name. "Same as always, Miss Varnon?" I nodded, smiling politely, thinking I was doing a good thing, thinking love was still a language she spoke. Now it just sat there like a joke. I closed the fridge and leaned against the counter, arms wrapped around myself, my breath caught in my chest. How long had they planned this? My mother always had a way of making cruelty look like elegance. Taryn? She didn't even bother pretending. But the two of them together? That was a game I never knew I was part of. I wandered into the living room and sank onto the old velvet sofa, the one Mom insisted we reupholster every spring like clockwork. The scent of lavender still clung to its cushions. For a second, I imagined her walking in, slippers sliding softly over the floor. "Elyse, darling," she used to say, "don't fuss over what you can't fix. Be graceful." I used to take that as wisdom. Now it felt like a warning, or worse, a setup. The silence of the house made my ears buzz. I stared at the photo on the mantel, me, Taryn, and Margot at the cabin, all smiling. But if you looked closely, my arm was awkwardly placed behind Taryn, not around her. Margot's fingers were on her shoulder, not mine. I hadn't noticed it before. Now I couldn't unsee it. A flash of memory surfaced. It was 5 years ago. I had just been offered a position at a New York firm, my dream job, corner office, national clients, a salary that didn't start with a maybe. I walked into the kitchen that day, bubbling with excitement. Margot was sitting at the breakfast table reading the Seattle Times. "Mom, you're not going to believe this," I said. "I got it. Hirsch and Madsen offered me a senior position." She didn't even look up. "Oh, darling," she said, "what would happen to me if you left?" I laughed, thinking she was being sentimental, but her eyes didn't soften. They narrowed, just a touch, enough to freeze my joy in place. "You know your sister isn't the domestic type." So I stayed. I told myself it was love. That family came first, but it wasn't just that. It was fear. Fear that leaving would make me like her. Now I saw it for what it was, manipulation draped in motherhood. The next morning I walked into Taryn's room. She wasn't there, hadn't stayed the night, of course, but something caught my eye on her vanity. A new Prada handbag, white leather, gold hardware, still in its branded dust cover. Retail? At least $3,500. I stared at it like it might lunge at me. She hadn't even waited, hadn't even pretended to grieve. The will hadn't been filed for 48 hours, but Taryn was already shopping the spoils. My fingers hovered over the bag, not touching it, just tracing the air around it like I could feel its heat, the same way you can feel a stove after the fire's gone out. I turned away, heart hammering, when something slid off the vanity, an envelope. It was empty, but the handwriting on the front, Margot's cursive, delicate, contained. "Taryn, use discretion." That was all it said. I pressed the paper to my chest. A scream built inside me, sharp and full of rot. I didn't let it out. Not yet. Later that day, Julian called. "Just checking in," he said. "Wanted to see how you're adjusting." Adjusting? I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, steadying my voice. "Julian, why wasn't I told about the will earlier?" A pause. He cleared his throat. "Margot had firm instructions." I closed my eyes. "Firm enough to blindside her own daughter?" Another pause. "She said you were too sentimental." That word, sentimental. It felt like a knife dressed in silk. After we hung up, I wandered back into the study, pulled open the old desk drawers, searching for something, anything to make sense of this. One drawer stuck. I yanked it. Papers spilled out, old statements, greeting cards, a faded recipe for creme brulee. And then, a photo. Margot and Taryn, laughing. On the porch of the cabin, no sign of me. On the back, scribbled in ink, "For the plan. M." Plan? What plan? The air thickened around me. That photo wasn't just a memory. It was proof. Proof that whatever happened, whatever this betrayal was, hadn't been sudden. It had roots, years deep. I pressed my palm to the desk's cool surface, trying to quiet the rising panic. They hadn't just chosen Taryn. They had erased me. And in that moment, standing under the yellowed light of the study lamp, I felt something shift, something cold, and very, very clear. They thought I was soft. They thought I'd crumble. But they'd forgotten one thing. I had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing to lose, they dig, they don't stop. Because behind every perfect signature might be a crack. And I was about to find it. Grief makes you dig, but betrayal makes you search. I returned to the study just after midnight, a dim desk lamp the only source of light. Shadows stretched across the walls like arms reaching for something they'd already lost. My fingers trembled as I opened drawer after drawer, pages fluttering like moth wings. Receipts, prescriptions, clipped recipes in Margot's perfect cursive. Everything looked so normal, but normal had lied to me before. I dropped to my knees, yanked open the bottom panel, and that's when I found it. A small black leather-bound book tucked behind a row of architecture journals, old, smooth, with a silver clasp that refused to budge. A diary. I stared at it, breath tight in my chest. The leather was cool to the touch, like skin too long in the shade. There was no label, no initials, but it reeked of Margot. Lavender oil, the faintest trace of expensive cigarettes. I tried to open it, locked. Of course. I ran my fingers over the clasp, simple but firm. No key in sight. I flipped it over. A faint scratch along the spine caught the light. It wasn't natural, too deliberate. Had someone tried to force it open? Suddenly the walls felt closer, like someone had been here before me, someone who wanted what was in it. I rose slowly, hugging the diary to my chest. My pulse quickened. I wasn't alone in this game, and I was starting to think, maybe I never had been. The next morning I walked into Julian's office. The air smelled like fresh printer ink and lemon furniture polish. It was too sterile for the kind of rot I carried in with me. He looked surprised to see me. "Elyse," he said, standing awkwardly. "I wasn't expecting—" "I found something," I said, placing the diary on the table between us. His face didn't twitch, not even a flicker. That alone made my stomach knot. "Where did you get this?" he asked, too carefully. "In the study," I lied. "Buried, like a secret." He tapped the cover with one finger. "No curiosity, just calculation." "There's no key?" "No," I said, "and I don't think it's just a journal." He looked up sharply. "Why's that?" "Because you look nervous," I said. Silence stretched. He pulled his hand back. "I'm just surprised. Margot never mentioned me either," I snapped. He leaned back in his chair, letting the words settle. "I wouldn't get carried away," he said. "Margot was complex." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I said. My voice cracked, not from anger, but from the years I spent making excuses for her. "She planned this, Julian. The will, the exclusion, Taryn's bag, the smirk. None of this was an accident." He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either. "I'll look into the lock," I said, picking up the diary, "but if you know what's in here, now's your chance." He hesitated, then said, "Be careful what you dig up, Elyse. Some things are meant to stay buried." That was the first time I saw fear in his eyes. It didn't last long, but it was there. I left without another word, but the diary suddenly felt heavier in my bag, like it was listening. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by tools, paper clips, tweezers, bobby pins. I'd watched too many lockpicking tutorials. None of them helped. I gave up after an hour, slumping back against the closet door. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind outside had gone still. I looked at the diary on the rug in front of me, just leather and secrets. But I could almost hear Margot's voice. "Don't you dare." That's how she used to scold me when I asked too many questions as a child. About Dad. About her arguments with Taryn behind closed doors. About the time she came home with blood on her blouse and claimed it was red wine. I remembered hiding under the dining table once, watching her heels pace furiously in the kitchen. She muttered to herself, words I couldn't make out. But one sentence rang out then, and again now in my mind. "Secrets make space for survival." I used to think she meant her survival, but now I wondered if she meant mine. I was jolted back by the sound of my phone vibrating on the dresser. Julian. Again. I let it ring. And then, out of nowhere, a memory. 6 months ago. Mom was still sick. Taryn had just left after one of her visits. I was helping Margot into bed when she grabbed my wrist, harder than usual. "If anything happens," she whispered, eyes foggy but sharp beneath, "don't believe everything they say." I thought she was talking about the doctors. Now I wasn't so sure. My hands curled into fists at the memory. The next day I returned to the study, this time hunting with purpose, looking not just for answers but keys. Inside a hollow book spine, I found a brass key. Small, unassuming, ornate. It didn't match the diary. Damn it. But as I stood up, a sudden wave of dizziness hit me, like the room had tilted. I caught myself on the edge of the desk, and that's when I saw it. The middle drawer, slightly ajar, a space behind the file divider, a false back. My fingers scraped behind it, heart pounding, and then I felt it. A key, old, blackened, the kind of key that belonged to a secret. I ran upstairs, breath sharp in my throat, and slid it into the diary lock. Click. The cover creaked open, pages stiff from disuse. My hands trembled as I flipped to the first entry. March 14th. If anyone finds this, I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth. Then, beneath it, scribbled in red ink, "Taryn is not ready. She'll ruin everything." My breath caught. What everything? But before I could turn the page, a noise outside, a door creaking. Not mine. Someone else was here. I froze. The sound outside wasn't wind, it was deliberate, slow, a door creaking open, then silence. I killed the bedside lamp, heart pounding in my throat. Every inch of me listened. Footsteps, barely audible but real, somewhere downstairs. I slid the diary beneath my mattress and moved toward the hallway, barefoot on cold wood, praying every floorboard would stay silent. Halfway down the stairs I heard it, the soft click of the front door closing, not slamming, just clicking shut. Like whoever had come in didn't want me to know they'd been here. By the time I reached the bottom step, the house was still again, empty, or pretending to be. I stood there, arms wrapped tightly across my chest, the air too still, too sharp. Something in me knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next day, I tried to distract myself, but nothing stuck. Not food, not the rain tapping against the windows, not the way Julian's number kept flashing on my phone, only for me to let it die unanswered. I needed space, clarity. I needed a reason. So I left the house and wandered aimlessly, coat pulled tight, hood up, until I ended up near the edge of town. An old cafe Mom used to love. That's when I saw her, Taryn, sitting by the window, laughing, shoulders back, drink in hand, perfectly staged in effortless luxury. Across from her, a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, designer scarf, big gold hoops, the type of friend who used "sweetie" as a threat. I ducked behind a parked SUV and inched closer, the drizzle beating on my sleeves. Taryn leaned forward, lowered her voice, but not enough. "I told her," she said, flicking a crumb from her lip. "Mom and I had this worked out for months. Elyse always plays the martyr, but she folds, every time." My stomach twisted. She sipped her latte and continued, eyes sparkling. "Poor thing doesn't even realize. The more she investigates, the worse it'll be for her." The woman snorted. "Is she still sniffing around the will?" "Oh, please," Taryn rolled her eyes. "She doesn't get it. This was always about keeping the legacy clean. I mean, Elyse designs chairs. I run people." I didn't feel the cold anymore, just heat, raw and pulsing under my skin. I reached into my coat pocket, fingers fumbling, then found it. My phone. I hit record. Taryn kept talking, smug, careless. She was never built for this. Mom said it herself. "We'll make her give up her share. She won't fight." My jaw clenched so tight it ached. I pressed the phone tighter against the coat fabric, the screen still glowing red. She had no idea. "I mean," Taryn laughed, "the fact that Elyse thinks this is even winnable, it's cute. Tragic, but cute." The other woman leaned in. "And the diary?" Taryn's face changed. She went still, eyes shifting. "Don't bring that up here." Diary? She knew. My blood went cold again, but then she smiled and waved her hand, brushing it off. "Anyway, it's handled. The final touch is in motion. Just one last piece." "The final touch?" The woman raised an eyebrow. "You sure she won't find it?" Taryn sipped her drink. "Even if she does, it'll be too late." I stepped back, the gravel under my boots crunching louder than I wanted. I turned and walked fast, not looking back, replaying every word. Handled. Final touch. Too late. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I sat in the front seat, recording still running. I played it back once, twice. Taryn's voice crackled through the speakers like acid. I had proof, not of everything, but of intent, of her smug confidence, of the collusion. And for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. I drove home under gray skies, rain streaking the windshield like veins, but I didn't feel powerless anymore. I transferred the recording to a backup drive, then another, then emailed it to myself and Clara, just in case. And then I sat, back in the study, the diary on my lap, the fire crackling quietly behind me. I opened it again, flipping past the first page. May 2nd. Taryn lied about the fundraiser. I saw the transaction. If she's doing this already, how can I trust her with it all? My breath caught. June 10th. Julian is growing nervous. I told him she wouldn't notice the change, but he said, "Elyse will surprise you." I laughed, but something in his voice made me pause. Change? What change? I turned the page. June 28th. I left the envelope in the cabin. If anyone finds it, they'll know the truth, but it's better than silence. An envelope. In the cabin. My fingers curled around the diary's edge. That cabin was 2 hours east. I hadn't been back in years. Not since, well, since before the distance between us became permanent. I leaned back, firelight flickering across the pages, thinking of Margot, of all the years I spent trying to earn a place that had never been mine, and of Taryn, bold enough to laugh about it over brunch. I picked up my phone, played the recording again, and hit Save to Cloud. Then I whispered, "You're not going to win." But even as I said it, I knew something was still missing. The final touch. Whatever it was already in motion. There's something hollow about truth when it comes too late. It doesn't soothe, it stings. I stared at the page in Margot's diary again. Taryn is not ready. She'll ruin everything. And still, she left it all to her. No matter how many times I read it, it didn't make sense. Unless something had changed. Or someone had changed it. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, my eyes locked on the will's signature. Margot's name in looping black ink, too perfect, too smooth. I'd watched her sign birthday cards for decades. This didn't feel like her. I needed proof, real proof. So I called someone who'd always terrified me a little, Professor Libby Crosswell, my old calligraphy teacher from RISD. She'd gone freelance since retiring, now working as a forensic handwriting analyst in Oregon. She picked up on the third ring. "Elyse Varnon," she said, crisp and sharp as ever. "I haven't heard your name since you bombed your final because of a breakup." "Hi, Professor," I said, trying not to flinch. "I need your help." We met the next day in her Portland studio. The walls were lined with vintage ink bottles and faded parchment samples. The room smelled like dust and bergamot. I handed her a folder. Margot's old cards, her medical forms, and a scan of the will. She didn't speak for 20 minutes. She just worked. Rulers, magnifiers, light boards. Her eyes narrowed, lips pressed thin. I watched her fingers, the way they hovered before each line. Precision, discipline, familiar cruelty. Finally, she looked up. "Well," she said, "this signature, it's a mess." My breath caught. She pointed to the curve of the M. "Margot looped her M's clockwise, always. This is counterclockwise. And look, no pen pressure variation. It's traced. Poorly." I swallowed. "So it's fake?" "It's forged," she said flatly. "But not by a stranger. This was someone who practiced. A lot." A tremor ran through my chest. I asked the question before I was ready for the answer. "Could it have been Taryn?" She didn't blink. "If it was, she had help. Whoever did this didn't do it alone." I left shaking. The wind outside sliced through my coat. The sky over Portland was heavy with rain, but my thoughts were louder. Not just a betrayal, a conspiracy. And it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, legacy, erasure. Back home, I stood in Margot's office again, the forged will on the desk, Libby's report in hand. Then came the sound of keys in the front door. I barely had time to hide the folder before Taryn walked in, uninvited. She stood in the foyer like she owned the house, tan trench coat, sunglasses still on, like she'd stepped out of a catalog for women who ruin lives for sport. "Elyse," she said, voice sugar slick, "you weren't answering my texts." I stared at her. "What are you doing here?" She shrugged, stepping closer, heels echoing across the hardwood. I thought maybe we could talk. I mean, this thing between us has gotten dramatic. She said it like she wasn't the drama. I know Mom's death was intense, but we're sisters. You can't seriously think she didn't want me to have you forged her signature. It landed like glass breaking. She blinked, then laughed, but it was brittle. Excuse me? I had it analyzed, I said. It's not hers. And if you think I won't take this to court, she cut me off. You think I did this alone? There it was, a crack. I stepped closer. I think you're sloppy and scared. She looked at me, eyes narrow. Mom knew what she was doing. She wanted this. No, she wanted to control the narrative, I snapped, even from the grave. Taryn's jaw clenched. Elyse, listen to me very carefully. If you go public with this, you will lose. You'll look unstable, grieving, vindictive. Better than complicit. She stepped closer. You really think a court will believe the daughter who walked away from everything? I didn't flinch. Try me. For a second, she looked like she might slap me. Instead, she smiled. I hope you have more than that little folder, because Margot left me everything, and no one's going to dig her up and ask her. She turned to leave, but I couldn't stop myself. What was the final touch, Taryn? She paused, tilted her head. I don't know what you mean, she said, and left. Liar. That night, I sat on the bedroom floor, files spread around me like a crime scene. One line in Libby's report haunted me. Practiced for months, possibly coached. That meant Margot knew. She may have even approved. I stared at the fire until my eyes blurred, and then I saw it again, the cabin entry from the diary. I left the envelope in the cabin. If anyone finds it, they'll know the truth. I had to go, but just as I reached for my bag, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a voice. Low, distorted. Stop digging. And a click. I stared at the screen. My reflection was barely visible in the black glass. Someone else was watching. The voice still echoed in my ears. Stop digging. I stared at the phone until the screen faded to black. My reflection ghosted across the glass. Whoever it was knew I'd found something, knew I was close. The night stretched long after that. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, stiff and alert, the diary tucked beneath my pillow, one hand resting on it like a child clinging to a nightlight. The shadows on the ceiling looked different now, less like corners and more like watchers. Morning came slow and gray. Rain tapped on the window like a metronome to my anxiety. I needed answers. But the deeper I dug, the more I began to question everything I thought I knew. Not just about Taryn or the will or the cabin, but about Margot, the woman I thought I understood. Back when I was 10, I remember Margot pulling me out of school early one day. No warning, just her standing in the office with oversized sunglasses and a bright red scarf knotted at her neck. She took me to a cabin in the Cascades. We stayed for 3 days, just us. She made hot cocoa with real chocolate shavings, let me sleep in her bed, brushed my hair until I fell asleep. And on the second night, she whispered to me, "Never let people know what you're planning, Elyse. They can't twist what they don't see coming." I thought it was a secret between us. Now I wonder who she was really warning me about. The phone call last night had jolted something loose, a fear I hadn't felt since childhood, that maybe I didn't really know her, not truly. I went to the attic. The air was colder up there, stale with dust and memory. Boxes stacked like forgotten tombstones. Most were sealed, some weren't. I found a battered storage bin labeled Sea Trip 2017. The cabin trip. Inside, faded Polaroids, old receipts, a few sweaters folded with mothballs tucked between them, and a file folder. My fingers tingled as I flipped it open. Inside, an itinerary typed on Margot's letterhead. Handwritten notes in the margins. Teach Taryn. Doc copies. Verify later. Practice ink flow. My heart skipped. Another page. Taryn's handwriting, all loops and leanings, notes that mirrored the signature on the will. This wasn't just inheritance planning. This had been rehearsed. And I hadn't just been left out. I'd been deliberately kept blind. I sank down onto the attic floor, knees pulled to my chest. It wasn't just favoritism. It was grooming. Margot had been preparing Taryn for this, teaching her to manipulate, to forge, to win, while I made tea and folded laundry and stayed quiet. I always thought I was the dutiful daughter. Turns out I was the decoy. A loud crash from below shattered the moment. I jumped, heart slamming into my ribs. I bolted down the steps 2 at a time. The living room was empty, but the back door was wide open. Wind pushed the curtains inward, the rain now heavier, angrier. I grabbed a towel from the counter and slammed the door shut, locking it tight. Every nerve in my body was on fire. I searched the house. Nothing missing, no one inside. But someone had been here. A warning, maybe, or a test. I walked back into the study, rain dripping from my sleeves. There, on the center of the desk, something I hadn't left there. A photo, face down. I picked it up slowly, fingers trembling. It was from that same cabin trip. Margot and Taryn side by side in front of the fireplace, both smiling. And in the background, blurry but unmistakable, Julian. I stared at the image. My breath caught in my throat. He'd said he never went. Said he barely knew Taryn. So why was he there? I flipped the photo. On the back, only trust what's written in ink. M. I sat hard in the chair. The room spun. Margot had lied. Julian had lied. Taryn was just the sharpest blade, but someone else had handed her the knife. That night, I sat in the dark with a glass of whiskey and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The storm outside raged harder now, as if trying to wash the house off the map. The lights flickered once, twice. I lit a candle, just in case. Then I took out the diary again. I needed more. A crack, a clue. August 1st, told Julian not to mention the cabin. He's too nervous, might fold, but Taryn needs him. She trusts him more than she trusts herself. August 15th, Elyse asked about the cabin today. I told her it was moldy and sealed off. She believed me. She always believes me. That's what makes this easier. I pressed my hand to my mouth, stomach twisting. Every memory of Margot telling me, "You're my steady one," now felt like manipulation. A leash wrapped in velvet. I scrolled back to Julian's last voicemail. His voice was calm, too calm. "We should talk. There's context you're missing." I saved it, then backed it up. Then I wrote his number on a Post-it and tucked it into the diary. If anything happened to me, someone needed to know. I stared at the candle flame until the wax pooled and dripped over the rim like tears. I wasn't done, and neither were they, because someone had opened that door. Someone wanted me afraid, but they hadn't figured out the one thing Margot taught me that stuck. You don't win by playing fair, you win by playing smarter. The next morning, I checked the locks 3 times. Each one clicked into place, solid and final, but I still didn't feel safe. The silence in the house wasn't comforting. It was alert, as if the walls themselves had been listening, watching. I made coffee I didn't drink, turned on the news I didn't watch. Every creak of the floor, every passing car outside made my skin prickle. Whoever made that call the night before, they knew I was getting too close, and they weren't bluffing. But the fear didn't stop me. It fueled me. I drove to the office. My design studio sat above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon and yeast, but today I barely registered it. Inside, Clara was already at her desk, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by swatches of coastal blues and raw linens. She looked up when I walked in and froze. "You look like hell." "Good morning to you too," I said, shutting the door behind me. I dropped my bag and pulled out the photo, Julian at the cabin. Her eyes narrowed immediately. "What is this?" "Proof he lied," I said. "He told me he was never there." Clara took the photo, studied it. "He's not even trying to hide. That's a whiskey in his hand." I nodded, already pulling out the diary and flipping to the entries about Julian. Margot was orchestrating something bigger. She wasn't just favoring Taryn. She was building a cover story, coaching her, manipulating both of us. Clara glanced at the diary, then at me. "You need to leave that house," she said softly. "You're not sleeping. You're jumping at everything. What if—" "My phone rang last night," I said, cutting her off. "Blocked number. A voice told me to stop digging." Her face drained of color. I hadn't seen Clara scared before. It made the air in the room shift. "That's not just intimidation anymore," she said. "That's a threat." I nodded, "Which means I'm close." We were interrupted by my phone buzzing on the desk. Blocked again. I stared at it, let it ring, then silence. Then another buzz. Voicemail. I played it on speaker. A distorted voice, the same low tone. "You're not the only one who can bury things, Elyse. Let it go." Then static. Clara's hand went to her mouth. I saved the message, heart pounding. "This isn't just Taryn anymore," I whispered. "She's not smart enough to make those calls untraceable." "So who is?" Clara asked. I looked at the photo again. Julian, smiling like someone who thought the camera would never come back to haunt him. That evening, I went back to the house and opened my laptop. I had one goal: trace the call. I wasn't tech savvy, but I knew someone who was. Luca, an old friend from college, now a cybersecurity analyst. I hadn't talked to him in years, but within minutes of texting the voicemail, he replied. That scrambled through 2 VPN layers, but the IP bounces back to a legal office in Capitol Hill. Julian's office. I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat and keys, adrenaline buzzing through my limbs like static. The city lights blurred past the windshield. Rain streaked sideways across the glass, street lamps flashing like warning signs. I parked 2 blocks away, walked the rest. The building was dark, but his car was out front. I hesitated only a moment before walking up and knocking on the door. Hard. A pause. Then footsteps. The door creaked open. Julian, still in his tie, sleeves rolled up, face pale. "Elyse?" "I need to talk," I said. He glanced around, then stepped aside. Inside, the office smelled like legal pads and stale coffee. I sat across from him, took out the photo, laid it on the desk. "You lied." He stared at it. His eyes flicked once, then stayed still. "Why?" He didn't speak. "Julian, I'm done playing nice. I know about the coaching, I know about the forgery, and I know someone's been calling me." His eyes darkened. "You think I'm making the calls?" he asked, voice low. "I think someone in your office is. And I think you're helping them." He sighed, running a hand down his face. "I didn't know it would go this far." My breath caught. "So you were part of it?" "I notarized the will," he said. "But the signature wasn't Margot's, not the final one." I blinked. "What?" "She signed an earlier draft, one where you got 50%. But after she got sick again, things changed. Taryn started coming around more. Margot wanted her to feel responsible." I stared at him. "She never trusted Taryn with responsibility." He nodded, eyes heavy. "That's why she made a second version. And that one never got signed. Taryn panicked. She brought me the forged one 2 days after Margot died. I felt sick. You helped her." "I froze," he said. "I didn't know what else to do. It was already filed. I thought if I just stayed out of it. But you didn't," I snapped. "You sent me that will. You stood in that room. You let me believe it was real." "I didn't think you'd fight back," he said quietly. I stood. "That's your mistake." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "There's more." I froze. He looked up, eyes glassy. "There's another document, something Margot wrote weeks before she died. It's not in the system. I hid it." My throat tightened. "Where is it?" He hesitated, then said, "It's in the vault behind her old office painting, if it's still there." I didn't wait for more. I left, heart racing, rain slicing across my cheeks like tiny blades. By the time I reached home, the house was dark, too dark. I stepped inside, the floor creaking louder than usual, and then I saw it. The study door was ajar, and inside, papers scattered, drawers pulled open, diary missing. Someone had been here, and this time, they didn't knock. The study looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. Papers strewn across the floor, desk drawers half open, some yanked out entirely, bookshelves disturbed, their contents dumped in careless piles. And worst of all, the diary was gone. I stood in the doorway, heart thrumming in my ears, a chill spreading across my skin like ink in water. Whoever had broken in knew exactly what they were looking for. They didn't touch the electronics, not the safe, just the words, just the evidence, the diary. I moved through the room slowly, fingers brushing along the desk's edge, not sure if I was shaking from anger or fear. A part of me already knew who had done this. Not a stranger, not a petty thief. Someone who needed that diary gone before I read another word. Taryn. She was getting desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. I paced the house until sunrise, my mind moving faster than my body could keep up. They'd taken the diary. Fine, but they hadn't taken my resolve. And they hadn't taken what I had next. The house. Margot's estate, the crown jewel of her legacy, still legally belonged to me. Because while the forged will was in dispute, the property remained in limbo. And limbo could be weaponized. By noon, I was sitting across from a real estate developer named Carter Lynn, a quiet man in a navy sport coat with sharp eyes and no time for small talk. "This is a prime lot," he said, scanning the property photos I'd sent. "I've been eyeing that neighborhood for months. Zoning just cleared." "Then I want to sell," I said, voice even. "All of it." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I heard the estates. I have power of execution until the dispute's resolved. It's my name on the documents, and I want it gone." He studied me for a second too long. "I'll need confirmation from your attorney." "You'll have it by the end of the day." We shook hands. His grip was firm, like someone sealing a deal with dynamite. On my way home, I called Clara. "Taryn's going to lose it," she said, voice hushed with awe. "You really sold the house?" "Not yet, but by tomorrow morning she won't own a damn inch of it." There was silence on the other end. Then, "I'm proud of you." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just whispered, "Thanks," and hung up. By dusk, I had signed the preliminary agreements and sent them to Julian. He responded within 10 minutes. "This will trigger a legal response. Be prepared." I was, because I knew exactly how she'd find out. And she didn't disappoint. At 8:12 the next morning, my phone rang. Taryn. I let it buzz 3 times, then picked up. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped, voice already splintering. "Hi, Taryn. Lovely morning, isn't it?" "You can't sell the house. You're not allowed." "Oh, but I am," I said, calm as ice. "Until this whole forged will situation is settled, it's mine. All of it. And it's gone. A developer's buying it. Bulldozing it, probably. I hope you took photos." She was breathing like she'd run a mile. "Mom's legacy." "Mom's manipulation," I corrected. "She used this house to divide us, to control us. Well, now it's just wood and wiring." "You're insane," she hissed. "You've completely lost it." "No, Taryn," I said, standing in the same study she had ransacked. "For once I found clarity." Then I hung up. It was like cutting a wire on a bomb I'd been living inside for years. For the first time, I felt power in my chest, not rage, not fear, just control. But it didn't last long. That afternoon, Julian called again. "They've filed an injunction," he said. "Taryn's claiming you acted out of vengeance. She's got a new attorney and they're pushing for a cease and desist on the sale." I didn't even flinch. "Can they stop it?" "Maybe. Depends on the judge. Depends on what else you have." I thought about the missing diary, the voicemail recordings, the photos, the hidden document he told me about behind Margot's office painting. "I'm not out of ammo yet," I said. That night, as the ink dried on the pending sale contract, I stood in the living room one last time. It was quiet. Still. The kind of quiet that carries weight. Ghosts. I walked from room to room with a glass of wine in hand, running fingers along the walls I once painted myself, the banister I sanded down for Margot's birthday. Every inch of this house had once been soaked in my obedience, but now it was something else. A message. You can't erase me. At midnight, I lit a fire in the hearth and stood watching the flames rise. They didn't comfort me, but they did cleanse. Then, as I reached for the envelope of finalized documents, my phone lit up again. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But something told me I had to. I picked up, stayed silent. The voice came through, low and cold. "You think this is over? Selling the house doesn't mean you win. You've just made yourself a target." Then silence. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone and realized, whoever they weren't afraid of losing. They were afraid of what I'd find next. The house was gone, the diary was stolen, and now someone was telling me I'd made myself a target. I didn't sleep. Again. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the contract for the estate sale, fingers tracing the signature at the bottom. Mine. Even that felt like a line drawn in wet cement. I wasn't sure if I was sealing a victory or triggering a war. Then, just after 9 a.m., Julian called. His voice was rushed, like he'd just run up a flight of stairs. "You need to come in," he said. "Now." I didn't ask questions, didn't have to. I just grabbed my coat and went. His office was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. The front desk was unmanned, the lobby lights dim. Only Julian's door glowed with warmth at the end of the hall. Inside, he stood behind his desk, a single folder in hand. "I wasn't supposed to show you this," he said. He handed it over. Inside, a copy of Margot's handwriting, real this time. Not smooth or measured, messy, fragile, human. At the top, the date, 12 days before she died. And below that, conditional trust, $500,000. I blinked. "What is this?" Julian sat down, rubbing his temples. "She created it privately. It was meant for you, but with a clause. You only receive it if you formally drop all disputes related to the estate." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. What? "She thought you'd walk away," Julian said. "She was sure of it. Said you'd never want the fight." My jaw clenched. "So she tried to buy my silence." Julian nodded slowly. "But there's more," he said. "If you accept it, the will, the forged one, becomes legally valid, retroactively." I stared at him. "So if I take the money, I legitimize everything they did?" "Yes." I pushed the folder away like it had burned me. It made sense now. Why they were so confident, why the threats didn't stop. They thought I'd sell my integrity for $500,000. And maybe, if this were a month ago, I might have considered it. Back when I was tired, broke, still trying to believe my mother ever loved me in a way that wasn't conditional. But now I'd burned the house down, and they still thought I'd crawl back for scraps. I left the office without a word. Outside, the air was sharp, the sky the color of old bruises. I walked until my hands went numb. What kind of person designs a trap like that? What kind of mother leaves a financial landmine under her daughter's grief? I ended up at Clara's place. She opened the door before I could knock twice, her face pinched with concern. "I saw Julian's name on your caller ID," she said. "What happened?" I stepped inside, soaked from the walk. "He handed me the key to a golden cage," I said. We sat in her living room, light from a single lamp washing the room in honey-colored warmth. I told her everything. When I was done, Clara shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. "They made it airtight," she said. "Even if you proved the forgery, you'd be locked out once you accept the trust." I nodded. "Which means I never can." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, "Margot didn't just favor Taryn, she engineered her." "She wanted a legacy," Clara murmured, "and she thought loyalty could be bought." "But she never understood me," I said, voice raw. "She never understood that I wasn't loyal for the money. I stayed because I thought she'd finally see me." That's what hurt most. Not the money, not even the betrayal. The years I gave up hoping that being good would mean being loved. Clara reached over, her hand warm over mine. "She saw you," she said. "That's why she wrote that clause. She knew you'd have the power to destroy all of this." I swallowed hard. She was right. That night, I went home and stood in the darkened study. The air still smelled like firewood and old paper. I looked at the wall where the diary used to sit. Gone, but not forgotten. I walked to Margot's portrait, hanging in its massive silver frame. She looked down at me like she always did, composed, unbothered, and smug. I unhooked it from the wall, tilted it, and there it was, a seam in the plaster, a shallow vault. I pried it open. Inside, a sealed envelope, brittle with age. I pulled it out, fingers trembling. "If found, read alone." I sat at the desk, broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her handwriting, shaky, fading. "Elyse, if you're reading this, I assume the war has begun. I taught Taryn how to survive, but you were always the one who knew when to walk away. That's why I had to test you. I needed to know if you'd fight when no one was looking. If you'd fight for truth, not just for blood. If you're holding this, you already passed." I stopped reading. Anger rose in my throat like bile. It wasn't a letter, it was a final performance. A test. She was still playing God from the grave. I crushed the paper in my fist, then dropped it in the fireplace. I watched it burn, curl, blacken, disappear. And for the first time, I didn't cry. But just as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Let the money go, or we'll take something else." I stared at the words and knew, without a doubt, they hadn't finished playing, but neither had I. There's a moment right before a storm breaks, when the air thickens with everything unsaid. That's what it felt like inside me. Heavy, charged, ready. I stood at the park entrance, coat zipped to my throat, fists balled in my pockets. The sky above Seattle had turned slate gray, rain slipping down in cold sheets. And Taryn, of course, was late. When she finally appeared, umbrella tilted, heels wrong for the terrain, she didn't look like someone about to be exposed. She looked like someone annoyed she had to show up at all. "You picked the worst weather," she said, voice flat. I stepped out from under the shelter into the rain. "Good. Makes it harder for anyone to lie." She tilted her head. "Dramatic. Even for you." I pulled the envelope from my coat. Julian's sworn statement, the diary transcript, the image of the forged signature side by side with Margot's real one. Taryn didn't reach for it. "Read it," I said. "No. You forged our mother's will." The words felt lighter once they were out, like bricks I'd finally set down. Taryn's smile didn't break, but her eyes twitched. "I don't know what Julian told you, but—" "You practiced for months," I said, louder now. "Margot helped you at first, then changed her mind. You panicked, so you finished the job alone. You lied, you stole, and now you're out of time." Rain trickled from my bangs down to my lips, the cold biting into my jaw. "I will bury you with this," I said. Taryn's mask cracked, just for a moment. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She took a step forward, lowering her umbrella. "You don't have proof Margot didn't sign the will." "She left a second version," I snapped, "and Julian kept it. He flipped." That hit. Her breath caught, barely. But I saw it. "You're bluffing," she repeated, softer this time. She tried to reach for the envelope. I pulled it back. "You're not going to touch this." "Why now?" she hissed. "What's your endgame, Elyse? Burn it all down?" "No," I said. "You already did that." Thunder cracked above us, and I stepped forward, soaked now, unshaking. "You stole from me. You erased me. You and Margot. Mom wanted a fighter," she said. "She didn't think you had it in you." "She was right," I said. "Back then." Taryn's lips pressed tight, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to be," I replied. "But you should be afraid of the truth." She stared at me. Then something shifted, calculated calm replaced by desperation. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "If you go to court, the trust fund disappears. Everyone loses, you included." "I already lost everything." I handed her a flash drive in a Ziploc bag. "The voice messages, Julian's memo, your cafe confession, all of it. This goes to my attorney Monday if I don't hear from you." "You're bluffing," she repeated for a third time, but this time it sounded like a prayer, not a threat. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. "Okay, you want war? Fine." Her tone sharpened. "But you should know something before you take your little victory lap." She stepped forward, lowered her voice. "Margot didn't just pick me out of love or strategy. She picked me because she trusted me to keep the family intact. You were the risk." I blinked. "What?" "She didn't want you in charge," Taryn hissed. "Not because you weren't smart, but because you cared too much. You forgave too easily. And she thought that made you dangerous." I took a step back, wind slicing through the trees like breath through teeth. "I never wanted control," I said. "I just wanted truth." "Well," she said, fixing her coat. "Good luck with that." She turned and walked away, umbrella up again, each click of her heels fading into the rain. I stood there, soaked, stunned, the envelope limp in my hand. Everything she'd said echoed in my skull, but something didn't sit right. Why come at all? Why tell me I was a risk? Unless she was bluffing too. Back at home, I dumped the wet envelope on the table and opened my laptop. Clara had sent over the forensic expert's final analysis. At the bottom, a single note. Signature contains trace ink, overlap inconsistent with the original document's age. Falsification confirmed. I saved the file. 3 backups. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the time, 9:47 p.m. No one should have been there. I approached the door slowly, hand on the knob, and looked through the peephole. Empty porch, rain pooling on the steps, but when I opened the door, something slid across the floor. A manila envelope, no return address, just one word in black marker, withdraw. I knelt down slowly, hands damp, breath caught. Inside, photos, dozens of them. Me, Clara, my apartment, her office, the cafe, Julian's building, all dated, all recent, and at the bottom, a single note, last warning. I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was surveillance, and someone was closing in. I didn't sleep the night they delivered the envelope. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed with every lamp on, the photos scattered like confessions around me. They knew my movements. They knew Clara. They were daring me to flinch. But I didn't, because fear no longer ruled me. They wanted me to break. Instead, I decided to finish. At 7:03 a.m., I walked into Clara's office with 2 coffees and the manila envelope under my arm. She took one look at my face and locked the door behind me. "Tell me." I dropped the contents on her desk. She sifted through the photos in silence, eyes scanning every timestamp, every angle. "They've been following us for weeks," she whispered. "Longer, probably," I said, "but this was the final play. Intimidate me into walking away before I file." "And are you?" I looked at her. "No." By noon, Clara had connected me with her friend Monica, a corporate auditor who knew how to dig under polished floors and pristine bank statements. She worked fast. That evening, I got the call. "I found something," she said. "Taryn's trust account received a $200,000 wire 2 months before Margot's death, from a Shell LLC, registered to a virtual office in Nevada." I didn't speak. "There's more. The LLC traces back to a company Julian registered 3 years ago. That trust fund wasn't Margot's idea. It was theirs." My heart dropped. "They were building it together," I whispered. "Worse," Monica added. "They were funneling money from the estate. Bit by bit, Margot may have started the game, but they rigged the end game behind her back." So that was it. Julian wasn't just scared. He was dirty. And Taryn wasn't just greedy. She was laundering. The air in my studio that night felt dense, rain tapping against the windows, my breathing louder than the clock ticking behind me. I picked up the photo of Margot from her obituary, sharp eyes, cold smile. She'd orchestrated the betrayal, but they'd weaponized it. Now I had what I needed, not just emotional leverage, criminal leverage. At dawn, I packed 2 boxes, one with physical files, one with the digital backups. Then I drove to Portland, to the life I should have started years ago. Clara had already leased a temporary space for our new studio. It was empty, exposed brick, warm lighting, paint samples stacked in crates, but it felt like air after months underwater. She met me at the entrance, coffee in hand. "You sure you want to do this here?" she asked. "Start fresh while the war's still burning?" "I need to," I said. "Otherwise they still own my time." We worked in silence most of the day, setting up swatch boards, plugging in printers, testing layouts. By late afternoon, sunlight poured through the tall windows, dust dancing in the beams, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. But it didn't last long. Monica sent a PDF with the subject line, "Filed, the official complaint against Taryn and Julian, fraud, forgery, financial misconduct, witness tampering." I scanned each page, pulse steady, hands firm. Then came the final piece, a letter from Julian. Clara watched me as I opened it. It was typed, clinical, but buried in the last paragraph was the sentence that stopped me cold. "I never intended to hurt you. I was just trying to stay in control of a situation that had already spun out of it. You deserve to know. Taryn offered me more than money. She offered protection from something Margot threatened to expose years ago." I panicked. "And I'm sorry. I read it again." Then again, Clara touched my shoulder. "Do you believe him?" "I believe he's afraid." We didn't speak for a while after that. Later, I stood outside on the small balcony of the studio, the wind cool and clean. Portland smelled like rain and pine and beginnings. But even here, the shadows followed. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "This doesn't end well for anyone. Walk away while you can." I blocked the number, then walked back inside. That night, I filed the final affidavit, the forensic analysis, the trust documents, Julian's confession. It was done. But the cost hadn't settled yet. I stayed at Clara's place that evening. We shared wine, leftover pasta, and silence. And just before midnight, she asked me, "What if they come for you?" I looked at her. "They already have, and I'm still here." But I didn't tell her what haunted me most, that somewhere deep down, a part of me still wanted to understand Margot. Why she chose to orchestrate pain instead of peace, why she thought destruction meant love. As I lay on the couch, blanket pulled tight around my shoulders, I replayed her final words from the letter I'd burned. "I needed to know if you'd fight when no one was watching, and I had, but not for her. For me." The next morning, I checked my inbox. One new message. From King County District Court. Subject, Notice of Hearing, Varnon Estate Dispute. Attached was the case file. Hearing scheduled for next week. And then, an alert from Clara. A flagged payment. Taryn's account moving $80,000 into a private security retainer. It wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Everything sterile, clean, contained, like the walls themselves were trained not to react. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms resting flat on the wood. Clara sat behind me, quiet, unmoving. Julian sat across the aisle, pale and still, and Taryn? She looked like she was starring in her own legal drama. Hair perfect, outfit calculated, not a smudge out of place. But her eyes couldn't hide the panic. Not anymore. The judge flipped through the thick file. My evidence was all there, the forged will, the conflicting signatures, Julian's confession, the trust account tracing, the diary transcripts, the photo from the cabin. Months of unraveling their lies had led to this single moment. The judge cleared her throat. In light of the new documentation, expert testimony and sworn affidavits, I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Elyse Varnon. The room went silent. I didn't smile, didn't exhale, just sat there, steady. The forged will is nullified. The original division of assets is reinstated, the judge continued. Additionally, Mr. Hart will be referred to the state bar for disciplinary review, and Ms. Varnon, she glanced at Taryn, may face criminal charges pending financial fraud investigation. My sister didn't blink, but her grip on the table tightened, knuckles white. I stood up slowly, heels clicking on the polished floor as I left. Not triumphant, not broken, just free. Outside, the air smelled like sun and concrete, Seattle waking up from a long storm. Clara caught up to me near the courthouse steps, a half smile tugging at her face. You did it. No, I said. We did. She nodded. I didn't go back to the house. I'd already made my choice weeks ago when I signed the sale papers. The money from the estate had been transferred to a nonprofit, one I created under Margot's name. Ironically poetic, I thought. The Margot Foundation, dedicated to supporting daughters abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect them. Taryn found out a week later. I never heard her scream, but I imagined it. Somewhere behind designer walls and frozen assets, her voice cracking like glass. Julian pled out. Bar suspension, no jail time. He sent me a letter, short, full of half regret, and carefully worded explanations. I never opened it, because I didn't need to. Some things don't deserve a second look. Portland became home faster than I expected. The new studio bloomed like something that had been waiting for me to arrive. Clara and I booked clients who'd heard about the case through whispers and blog posts. Designs by the woman who sued her own blood, one client joked. But I didn't mind. I wasn't hiding anymore. Some nights I still thought about Margot, how she engineered chaos to feel in control, how she mistook obedience for love, how in the end she lost everything she'd built because she never learned the difference between power and trust. One morning, I stood in the center of our new space, sunlight pouring through the windows, dust dancing like it had in that moment weeks ago, and finally, I felt it. Stillness. Peace, not because I'd won, but because I'd walked away with my dignity intact. That was the real inheritance, and I had earned every inch of it. Love without respect is a debt you should never owe. Family isn't who names you, it's who sees you, even when you stop performing. So I stopped performing and started living. If you've ever been written out of your own story, let this be your reminder. You can write yourself back in, on your terms. Thank you for watching my story. If it resonated with you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know. And if you want more true stories of resilience, betrayal, and starting over, check out the next one. It might just be the voice you've been needing to hear.